Thank you, Tom. I'm joined by Twitter's global head of politics, Adam Sharp. Fascinating night thus far. What's it doing online?
Yes, it is. Well, the conversation today has been phenomenal. More people tweeting about the election than tweeted about the royal baby last Saturday. Red. Now, conservatives in blue driving that conversation. Right after that release, nearly half of all the tweets about the campaign were about the Conservatives and David Cameron.
And we don't know what they're saying, whether it's negative or positive in the way they're reacting to the exit poll, but at the moment the Tories are driving the conversation online.
Exactly. We've also seen another interesting shift. For most of the day, the Lib Dems, 2-3% of the conversation, behind UKIP and SNP all day. In the last hour, more talk about coalition, more than double, pulling ahead of UKIP and closing in on SNP as being the third in line to drive that conversation into tomorrow.
All right, Adam, thank you for flying in from Washington to join us here. I'm also joined by Graham Sharp from William Hill. How's it looking in your world tonight?
Bit of a seismic shift tomorrow.
Great debate about whether the polls that we've seen throughout this campaign are less or more accurate than the betting markets. What's your reaction to that, given what we've seen in the exit poll numbers?
Well, we really need to see the results when they come in to determine who's won and who's lost. But at the moment, we're feeling quite happy because a lot of people base their bets on the opinion polls. OK,
Graham, thank you. Joining me now is Miranda Green. You saw her earlier, of course, and Jenny Russell and Isabel Hardman from The Spectator. Jenny Russell, you are a friend of Ed Miliband's. What do you think he's thinking right now, looking at those numbers?
I'm sure he's looking at them and thinking, well, I'm not going to believe anything until I get the results in. The thing is that these results are so much at odds with the hundreds of polls he had during the campaign. Somebody's got something badly wrong.
Yep.
And it's interesting that tonight YouGov has called back the people that it spoke to earlier, and it hasn't changed its predictions. YouGov is thinking that the Tories are going to end up at about 284, Labour on about 260 or so. So one way or another, somebody tonight has got their predictions way out of line, and if you were Labour, all that you could possibly do at this moment is to hold tight and not start giving anything away or giving up the game until you know what the number of seats actually is.
Lord Mandelson said that all the parties have lost this evening. Is that great spin? He said that it's not all over for Ed Miliband, and do you agree with that analysis at this point?
I think it's impossible to tell. I think if this poll was right and it was 239 to 316, I think that would be a very, very bad result. I think there'd be a lot of unhappiness within the party, and I think that is certainly spin from Lord Mandelson. 316 for the Tories would be an unprecedented move for a governing party which has looked very unpopular for a lot of its time in office to suddenly gain seats in that way. And I have to say, I think something else that's very interesting about that is that a lot of people assume that if this poll is right, then the Lib Dems are in a very weak position. Actually, I think the opposite is true, because the Tories will need those 10 Lib Dem votes if they are to have a majority. It's much better to depend on the Lib Dems, who they know how to work with, than it is to depend on the DUP, who aren't frankly interested in British politics in the same way. And the Lib Dems are the ones who've got most to lose by joining a coalition again. So I actually think that if these results are right, it would have to be the Tories courting the Lib Dems desperately to say, please come back into government again. Even though you've been devastated by this, we can offer you some baubles that make it worth your while.
So, Miranda, if Nick Clegg keeps his seat in Sheffield this evening, how is he going to sell that to the party to say, look, we've got these seats, they've got theirs, we can restart the Rose Garden, we can do it again? How does he sell that to the party members?
Well, I feel quite, because of course this time, unlike 2010, the sort of element of surprise is lost of the two leaders, Cameron and Clegg, kind of springing it on their parties. Clegg successfully consulted the party, democratically approved it. Would that happen this time? Cameron would have to ask his own very bolshy, possibly backbenchers to approve a deal this time. Could Cameron even do a deal with the Lib Dems again?
Isabel?
I think David Cameron could do a deal with the Lib Dems again. I think seeing the government so close for the Tory MPs would be a pretty good incentive to go back in with the Lib Dems. But it would be very interesting, the mechanics of that coalition, because if you only have 10 Lib Dem MPs, they can't all be ministers, because that would look ridiculous, 100% of your party ending up on the government payroll. So it would limit their influence within government, because you'd have fewer ministers. Would Clegg really be able to argue for 50% representation on the Quad, which is the body that makes decisions at the top, it's the highest level of government? So there's all those sort of mechanical questions that have to be answered.
But remember, the YouGov survey, which Jenny referred to, is still putting the Lib Dem seat tally at around 30. So we should wait and see, because as with Labour, the Lib Dems shouldn't sort of be throwing everything up in the air right now.
OK, Miranda, ladies, thank you very much. Well, we'll see if there isn't a reworking of the Rose Garden, whether there is a reworking of the Quad a little later on, and maybe the next few hours and days. Tom?